Hi folks, Henry Sledge here. I get asked all the time if I thought the Pacific miniseries did a good job portraying my father. Well, I think they did a great job, and here's one thing I loved. The excellent rapport between Sledgehammer and Snafu.
You assholes are gonna miss cleaning out oil barrels pretty soon. You're gonna be humping up some fucking hill. Or across a beach, Japs pouring shit for fire, pissing your pants, crying boo-hoo, and wishing you were back here with nothing asked of you but to scrub oil out of drums.
Why don't you grab a brush? Give us a hand.
Fuck that shit, I scrub drums for no man.
Can we take a break?
Do whatever you want, this ain't my detail. I was supposed to dump y'all off here, then report back to the CP.
And why you still here?
I like to watch the new guys sweat.
It doesn't start out that way, but after a day or two in action, we see it really develop. I think it really gets dialed in after they come across the airfield the second day on Peleliu.
Saw you reading last night.
A Bible?
Writing, too. Ain't supposed to write shit down, you know. Gives the Japs valuable intel, they find it.
Guess I won't show it to him then.
Got a smoke? Thanks, Sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer. I like that.
Jesus Christ.
Don't worry, we got a nickname for you too, Bill Layden. We call you Ball-Peen Hammer. It's like a little hammer. For a little man.
All right, Snafu. Shit and ass. Fuck up.
Little joke from the little man.
Digital 410 proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome everybody to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite Don's Video is Cutting Out podcast. I'm sitting here watching
I was wondering if that was just me.
No, it's my computer. I may have to go no video for this episode. Just keep you going because my video is turning green for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah. I didn't know what the hell was
So anyhow, we're just going to, instead of messing, we're just going to keep on going, keep on running down the line. People can still see you on the live stream. And most people listen to the podcast via the audio anyhow, so why dwell on it? How are you doing, friend?
Doing well, man. Doing well. As always, glad to be here in the seat for another episode of World War II awesomeness, WTSP.
You know, it was an interesting idea you have, which is presenting, some of your ideas or thoughts or answering people's questions about how you feel about the HPS Pacific, because that's where a lot of people who've, were introduced to your father before they actually went out and read the book. Give us another little snippet, a little tidbit, something about the miniseries or the production of, or how you got involved that maybe perhaps we've talked about before and some of the new listeners haven't heard, or maybe you haven't discussed it with us yet.
Sure. Well, are you talking about a tidbit of something I really liked, or
just whatever
any aspect of it?
Just any behind the scenes stuff that a fan of the show may be interested in, whether it's about production or how you feel about just anything really.
Yeah. So the if you go to part 7, where they attack the bunker, and you have the part and with the old breed, that was a pretty cataclysmic moment for the Sledgehammer story and the arc of the Sledgehammer story, because that was, they have the LVT come up, fire a couple of rounds into it, and they have a flamethrower, which was Womack from Mississippi, standing by to douse it with a flamethrower. And as right after the LVT had fired its 375 rounds point blank into the side of the bunker, a Japanese soldier appears in the coral dust. He's got his arm cocked back to throw a grenade, and my dad had his carbine leveled on his chest and started squeezing off shots. And of course, they all subsequently shot the guy, and he falls dead, and the grenade goes off at his boots. But my dad was the one who started squeezing off the initial shots and killed him. And it was a very evocative scene, the way my father wrote that, and with the old breed. And so, I naturally assumed that when they filmed that scene, that they would film it exactly that way. And in my own mind's eye, I'd kind of played out many times how that would look.
But little did you know
because-
how Hollywood really works.
Yeah. Well, and then too, I'll add something else. So, for our listeners who are familiar with my dad's memoir with the Old Breed, the bunker assault was on D+13, 13 days into the battle on Ingusibus.
Well, that's
which
what
was
I was.
a little.
That's what I was going to ask you too. Not to stop in your tracks, but
Sure.
when you're watching the miniseries, you just think, "Oh, that's just part of the main assault. They're just walking through the jungle, came across this." But that particular
it's
mission,
like East or West Road on Peleliu.
yeah. Go
and
ahead.
so I'm like, cool. We're going to see another scene with those great amphibious tractors near those radial engines, and they're going to go across the sound like they did, and those Corsairs are going to be, dive bombing the place, getting ready for the troops to debark from the LVTs and go ashore. Well, as we know, you just see the bunker scene as if it's, they're walking up. It could have been East Road. It could have been West Road. I think actually Bruce McKenna, in a conversation with me, told me that it was West Road. And I asked him, I said, well, why are you guys not doing another landing scene? And he said, Henry, it's just very simple because it costs
Money.
an obscene amount of money to start those LVTs up. Every time we do that, our costs go sky high. And for the landing scene, we had to.
And plus, to be fair to them, as someone who spent 2-3 days on a film set, one little misstep by an actor, one little misstep by a driver, and it's cut, reset. Got to roll everything back, put more fuel into them, and it could be. And plus, a lot of those shots, you think, okay, here's a simple shot. We're just going to have some landing craft land. Well, they usually shoot them from multiple angles, so they got to reshoot. They may have to shoot one scene 6 times to cover it in every angle. And so, it's a lot of money. And we kind of discussed this too. The perfect example is the P-38 wing when Lucky comes across Gibson. He's in the cage. And Gibson starts talking about how, he was on a work detail and they start getting a strafing bomb run and they jumped in a slit trench and he could feel the Marine breathing on his back.
Yeah.
Saying the, praying. And if anybody's read any of the books, A Helmet for My Pillow or even Strongman Armed, I think he relays that in the third person. That didn't happen to Gibson. That happened to Lucky. But it made more sense to combine those stories into one scene because at a certain point, the story becomes more important than who it happened to or who said it. So are you going to film an entire scene where you got a bunch of Marines out in Slits Trench and pay to have, graphics of airplanes coming in just to recreate that? Or do you make that scene where Gibson's, now they have the ability to show the effects of war on a Marine? Because if you go, not to go too far off in the corner, but it wasn't until like the 6th or 7th time that I saw that series that I realized that Gibson plays more role than just that. When you're watching the first time, like, oh, here's Gibson. He's only been in one episode. No, he's the guy shooting the cow on the train. He's
right.
So as you watch it more and more, you realize, oh, he had a bigger role in the show. It just seemed like a background character so they can get to that point where they want to show here's a normal kid from the United States after strangling Japs in the woods and after shooting, he finally broke.
Yeah, Cape Gloucester. Yeah.
And so here's a way to take 2 important stories, combine them in one scene, and get it done with 8.5 minutes of an episode instead of creating that entire storyline of scene of Lakey working on the, work crew and then digging a trench and then jumping in and that.
And I so Bruce told me the deal on the LVTs and the costs, but I remember very well the day he called me and told me that the director wanted to shoot that scene a little bit differently and not have my dad just shoot the guy, with his carbine the way he actually did in his book. And he said what the director wants to do, because at this point we've already had several hours of, gratuitous violence and shooting and killing. And so people, whether they intend to be or not, are going to be somewhat desensitized to it. So what the director, it might have been Timothy Van Patten, who was director for that episode, or Carl Franklin, I can't remember, but Bruce McKenna told me, he said, what we think the director wants to do is have your father kill that Japanese soldier with a bayonet. but out of respect for you and your family, we want to know your thoughts on that. And I protested pretty vehemently, because Don, we've talked about it on this show. I mean, I remember my dad telling me that he never killed I asked, did you ever kill a Japanese with your bayonet? And he was always really definite in saying, hell no, I never let him get it close enough to me for that. Because they loved bayonet fighting and took every opportunity to do it. And they were really good at it. So he said, I wasn't going to give him that chance. But he said, look, I told him, I said, it's not a moral question. It's not a, I know I went back to my brother and my mother with that, and they were both kind of horrified. It just really the visceral aspect of killing a human being with a blade instead of shooting him. Well, that didn't concern me so much as just knowing factually my dad's story and knowing that he had said he had never done that. And I was really vehement with Bruce about, look, you're altering such solid source material. Don't do that. And he was, and again, my purpose of doing this, I mean, everybody who listens to our show knows that I love the Pacific. I'm a huge advocate of it. I speak about that all the time. But, you did ask that question, so I want to give you something. But he said, when I told him I was very opposed to the idea of shooting that scene where my dad kills the guy with a bayonet, he said, let me go back to the director. We'll talk about it. And I said, well, have him call me if you want to. I'll be happy to tell him myself.
Yep.
And that never happened. But, they compromised, and so we got what we got.
Yeah, they got him shooting him with an M1, because I'm looking at the scene on YouTube right now. So they got rid of the carbine and put an M1 in his hand.
Yep. And, because he had been blown off the top of the bunker. Of course, Layden took grenade fragments, and he's lying there blinded, and my dad and Sledge is with him right there. And then the Japanese soldier comes out of the bunker. Yeah, but again, you expressed it very well, Don. It comes like I had to get past that. Well, they didn't exactly do it play for play, movement for movement, the way it really was. And you have to get away from that and divorce yourself from that. And what it comes down to is telling the essence of the story.
Yeah, but the thing that kills me, the most egregious thing to me, is the fact that it wasn't until I met you that I learned that your father didn't carry a revolver.
Oh, well, yeah,
he carried a 1911.
We've talked about that.
I almost think it's a carryover. I almost think it's, hey, there's a scene in Band of Brothers where the local sheriff sends somebody a revolver, so let's do the revolver scene in the Pacific as well.
He sends it to Floyd Talbot, who's played by my buddy Matt Leach. Yeah.
And so maybe it's a little Easter egg or kind of a wink and a nod, but the fact that maybe they wanted to differentiate him from everybody else who's carrying a Colt 1911.
I don't know. I mean, I was really proud of the fact that I had and still have the 1911 automatic that he carried through. My grandfather sent it to my dad when he was on Pafuvu. It was after Peleliu, before Okinawa. My dad may have used a 45 on Peleliu, but not the one that my grandfather sent him. That came to him in the mail after Peleliu. So he carried that. Oh, good. I've got your video now. He carried that through Okinawa, but I have that. It's one of my prized possessions, as you know. And I had sent pictures of it to the people, to the Hollywood team. I described in great detail. So they had all that information. And then when I saw that scene with that model 1917 45 revolver, I was actually watching an editor's cut before the miniseries actually aired. And I was really upset. I'm going to be honest. I reached out to Bruce McKenna and was really pretty angry about that. But again, he said, look, Henry, that was not my decision. Yes, you did provide us with the good information. That was not my decision. He alluded to the fact it might have been Dale Dye's decision, but I don't know. I mean, I met Dale Dye here just this last August at the 20th symposium of the Band of Brothers actors at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, and he was very cordial. We talked very briefly, but I didn't ask him about that. That's water under the bridge. And I mean, that's one of those things, Don, like we've talked about, is I have watched the miniseries and become closer to it and really grown to love it for what it is. artistic license, man. I mean, it's just part of it.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, though, it would be different if, okay, he got issued a 45, we're going to make a revolver. But the fact that your grandfather sent it to him, that to me is a little like, okay. But
I don't know why they did it that way. But, look at, like, to your point of, you can only have so many characters, so you have to kind of you have to roll different things into certain, like, it was Doc Caswell who stopped my dad from taking gold teeth in what would have been part 7, okay, when they were up in the ridges. Doc Caswell was the one who did that. He was a good friend of my dad's. They stayed in touch for many years after the war. But they, we don't see Doc Caswell because they can only develop so many characters, right? So it's actually snafu, Sledgehammer, what you doing? Don't, And then the scene is great. I love the way they did it.
Because in that scene, it's almost like, here's Snafu, who's kind of been made out to be this hard ass. The war's kind of changed him. He's the old salty veteran, and here he is having a moment of reflection, or maybe even reverting back to, hey, I don't want him to become the horrible thing that I've become, and that all these other guys have become. So I'm going to try to put a pause on that.
Exactly. Spot on.
But speaking of movies, you wanted to talk about a particular movie tonight.
Yeah, well, we don't have to make it all about that one movie. So I just started reading James Holland's book, Big Week, about the massive bomber offensive in early 44 to not only attack German aircraft production, but also really take a swipe at their fighter strength to try to establish air superiority before, we invade the continent in June of 44. But in thinking of that, it's, as Don, I like our buddy Jeff, I share that passion for World War II airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
One of the iconic ones, of course, being the great B-17 Flying Fort. But, I just remember 12 O'Clock High with Gregory Peck just being such an iconic World War II movie with airplanes, because I know as a kid, anything that had World War II airplanes in it, just, I was captivated by it instantly.
Well, I have a confession to make. It's not the first time I've made this sort of confession on the show. But because I am dedicated to the show and to show prep, I have not seen 12 O'Clock High up until 211 minutes ago. That's right. I found it on YouTube and I watched it before the show.
Did you watch the whole thing?
Watched the whole thing.
Awesome,
and when you texted me saying, I'll be a few minutes late, I'm like, perfect. I can watch the last 15 minutes of I'm watching on my phone with earbuds. And I got to say, for anybody who's never experienced this, and to be honest, I really didn't pay attention until just now.
Right.
Old school movies that were shot on legit film, they transitioned to the digital format effing wonderfully. I'm watching this on my phone, on YouTube in HD, and it looks cleaner. When the movie was made in like 1949, 1950, was it?
Yeah, it was not long after World War II.
The quality, like I said, because it's shot in film, there's no computer graphics. You go back and watch the original Matrix now, and it looks so dated. Because there's no computer graphics, they had access to all the original. It looks like it was shot in black and white 2 days ago. The transition, with the exception of the actual war footage at the very end of the movie, but the first 200 minutes of this, or 185 minutes of this movie, it looks like it was shot on an iPhone yesterday. The film transitions into digital perfectly, with the exception of it being not widescreen. But you don't feel like it's a dated movie. I will say, for those who pay attention, especially when the movie starts kicking off, now most movies aren't shot in sequence. Maybe this one was, but you can definitely tell in some of the tertiary actors' parts, because film to that level was still a relatively new concept. You could tell a lot of the guys were classically trained stage actors. They had more of that stage acting movement and dictation. Some of the earlier guys, like when they first show them after the first run and they're going to interrogation, and the one guy who saw his buddy get shot in the head, his movements and his acting was a little stage acting, but after a while, that's a damn good movie.
Yes.
And perfect thing is, I literally just finished it, so it's fresh in my mind. First question I have for you, as a young tot, how did you have the attention span to make it through the first hour and 45 minutes of that, 145 minutes of that movie?
Well, that's a really good question. So as a kid, when I saw it, it was tough because think about it now. As a kid, when I would see these movies, I wanted to see,
Shoot 'em up.
aerial actions. I wanted to see scenes of them in the cockpit with their helmets and goggles and all that flight gear stuff, And if I didn't see that, man, then it was like, oh, I'm not getting what I need here. So as a kid, when 12 O'Clock High, it was a little bit of a hard sell.
Oh wow, 1964. It was a little later than I thought. I thought it was 1950. It was. Wow, it took quite a time. It took a little bit of time to make that movie.
It was made in 64.
64 to 67.
Wow, I would not. Are you sure?
I didn't think I'm looking on Rotten Tomatoes, 12 O'Clock High. Unless this is
Peck.
This may be a remake.
That may be the series.
Oh yeah, hold on.
The movie was made in the 50s, I thought, because Gregory Peck is really
12 O'Clock High. Yeah, 1949. That makes more sense.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. So you're thinking of that series.
Well, I just typed in 12 O'Clock High. You would think on Rotten Tomatoes they would show the movie first, but apparently not. But anyhow, yeah. So, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I strongly suggest it. The whole thing's on YouTube, uncut, uncommercial, perfect. But I guess maybe because they used, and it says right in the beginning, no spoiler. It says in the beginning credits, air combat footage was recorded during combat. Footage was obtained by the U.S. Air Corps and the German Luftwaffe. Mm-hmm. And so maybe because they had limited footage, they saved it for the end of the movie. But for the first 3/4 of the movie, you hear the guys going on these missions come back. They don't show any action. It's all content. It's all dialogue. And for someone under the age of 13, maybe we had longer attention spans back then. Definitely, I don't think you can make this movie today in that same format.
You could. I mean, a couple of little quick points of trivia. One of the scenes, it's where Gregory Peck's up there, or General Savage is up there, giving his pre-mission briefing and what have you. It shows a couple of scenes of all the guys sitting there in their flight gear. Somewhere in that group of young pilots and navigators and officers is Burt Reynolds.
Really?
Yeah, he was in that scene somewhere. And I think I've seen it, but it doesn't show him for very long. And then another little interesting tidbit, and I didn't know any of this till I started kind of digging up some stuff on the movie, looking on Wikipedia. So a lot of the scenes were filmed in Europe.
Yep.
Obviously, the aerial combat footage was, you've already given the goods on that. The scenes where it shows the camp, like early on when it shows the B-17 come in and crash land, gear up, the scenes of some of those camp scenes were filmed down near Fort Rucker in Alabama.
Really?
Yeah. And after I read that, I went back and watched the movie, and I'm like, yeah, man, that looks like an Alabama tree line right there. There's just something about it that kind of grabbed me.
Now,
but yeah,
as we said last week, I'm fresh off of, actually, I'm still in the middle of reading A Wing and a Prayer. And so when I started watching this movie, the acronyms they use, everything's spot on. And they make reference to the gentleman who wrote the book, flew on one of the missions with the 100th Bomb Group. And in the book, they're talking about how the 100th Bomb Group kind of had a bad reputation. They've been known for being kind of ragtag. The guys really didn't follow protocol. They kind of did their own thing, constant leadership change. And so when I started watching this, I heard 918th Bomb, 918th Bomb Group?
The 918th.
I'm like, 918th? I've never heard that before.
Well, so on that note,
I was like, is that a real bomb group? So I did what people do nowadays. I got on the old Google box.
Okay, so you're going to go ahead and say.
No, go ahead. You can hit it.
Well, no, I don't want to steal it from you.
Well, two things. I came across one. I just shared it on Facebook. Now, I wouldn't buy one of these things because they're outrageously expensive, but there's a cool little story. Guy whose father flew a B-17. He loved this movie so much that in 1993, he reached out to Fox and got the license to recreate the mug. and you can buy this mug. You know, the Robin
Doesn't
Hood.
Jeff have one of those?
He possibly could.
I think I see it when he's in his study there.
I posted the website where you can buy this mug, but from what he was saying on this website, they got the 918th because apparently the true bomb group was the 308th.
306.
306, yes, and they called it the Hard Luck Squadron, and if 306 times 3 is 918. And so that's where they came up with the 918th.
Yep.
Because I got the thing, I was like, well, maybe they changed it to protect the innocent, you know, because there's a whole aspect of this movie is about bad leadership, you know, people shirking their duties, and so I guess you would probably want to go with a fake bomb group so you're not throwing real people under the rug when it came to that.
Yeah, of course, because think about how many vets are going to watch that movie.
Well, that's a good thing, too. Good point you bring up, because when I was watching the final half of this movie, and you're seeing the combat footage, and you're seeing the guys jumping out of the planes, and some of the Germans getting shot down, it's like, wow, man, 1947. Not too far off from the war, or 1949. A little rough to think that you're showing footage of real people dying in your movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the scene that it may be in it's not Memphis Belle, but the footage that a lot of it showed Robert Morgan and his guys, and there it was actually used, I think, in multiple documentaries. But you see a scene of a B-17 getting hit, and it falls out of formation and begins to spin. And you hear the pilots in the airplane that's filming it. You hear the guys in the cockpit talking, just like they're just talking to each other, like you and I are talking right now.
Yeah.
And you hear one guy go, B-17 out of control, 3 o'clock. And you hear another guy go, okay, I just seen 2 guys come out of the bomb bay. And then you hear one go, okay, there goes another one. And then you hear a third guy go, come on, you guys, get out of that damn airplane. And I'm just like hooked on those words.
Yeah.
Because think about it, Don. I mean, those are probably buddies of theirs.
No, you're talking about the original Memphis Belle?
No, well, I'm talking about the footage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Hollywood footage. It is actual footage, and you hear the real air crew.
Yes.
Hey, I just seen 2 come out of the bomb bay.
Guys, get
out of there.
I don't want to run it for you, but I believe, yes, the video footage is correct. But I think when I did research on that, I think all the voiceover overdubbing was done in the movie studio afterwards. So the actual audio you're hearing, the radio chatter, I don't think is real. I think it was
okay.
The guys did it. The original guys did it. They did it in a studio phone. Doesn't mean they never really said it in real life, but in that particular incident, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I looked into it because I think Jeff and I talked about it, and I think the actual voice overdub for those missions, which makes sense because they didn't have a lot of audio recordings back then of the go with the video. That's why when you watch a lot of those World War II shows and you see video, most of the audio you hear the gunfire is put in post-production because there's the Signal Corps guys who are running up the Peleliu with your father and company, they don't have sound equipment microphones. They're just shooting. It's all video, no audio. And so that would kind of make sense as well.
I love, but to go back to 12 O'Clock High, man, those were just, all right, everybody, hold your positions. Gary Peck's trying to get them calmed down. And I mean, you've got FW-190s and 109s. Just, I love the way those 109s, that shows them, they would just come in just doing a slow roll firing as they would come, and they would pass underneath the B-17. That is just so badass. One
of the things that Robert Leckie says in his book, and your father may have made reference to it too, is how embarrassed they were when they would be in these pep talks before a mission, before landing. Oh, we're going to go kill some Japs, those buck-toothed, scary little bastards. They ain't no for the United States Marine Corps. And Robert Leckie definitely was, he would make comments about how embarrassed they all were to sit around and listen to ignorant nonsense. And in Wing of a Prayer, Henry H. Crosby kind of says something similar. He's like, we're sitting in this briefing, and here's this retread, which is great turn. I'm so glad I read half this book before watching that movie because a lot of the jargon carries over. And a retread is someone who served in World War I, who served in World War II, but was too old to participate in a combat role. So a lot of office desks, commanders, briefings, and all that. And Harry Crosby was saying, and Wing and a Prayer, how they could tell this guy was a retread because he was saying all the Jerrys, the Krauts, they're going to come flying
he's using
through.
all the tropes.
Yeah, and he was like, no one in the 100th Bomb Group refer to these guys in any sort of pejorative, not because they were above that, but because, as you were just saying, which is why it reminded me, they flew right through our formation. They were so brave and such stellar combat pilots, and the risk that they would take, yes, they're shooting at us, but the risk they would take flying through our formations, flying through machine guns to achieve their mission, that they had too much respect for them to call them a Jerry, a Kraut, a Hun, and those things. And so that's an interesting carryover as well. It seems like the guys who actually do the combat and the fighting, whether it's in the air or on the ground, they tend to have more respect for the enemy than the brass who put together the orders to send them out there to do the fighting, because they don't experience that hardship firsthand, at least most of them.
Yeah. There were just so many, oh man, the aerial footage, God, those 109s coming in just one after another, man, just rolling in on them. And can you imagine how, as we all know, claims were grossly inflated by everybody,
Yep.
Japanese, Germans, Americans, British. But can you imagine being a waist gunner, back there in the rear section, the rear fuselage section of a B-17, trussed up in all that cold weather gear with a 50 caliber. I guess they were twin 50s. Were they twins or singles? I can't believe I have to ask
I
that.
think the waist gunners were single. I think the tail gunner and nose gunner were doubles. But you're
right. Yes, the waist gunners were singles. Can you imagine a 190, a Focke-Wulf 190 or a BF 109 coming in on you at 300, 330, 340 miles per hour, trying to hit that?
You want to talk about leading your target.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge of that is mind-boggling.
Well, not only that, but as we spoke of last week, prior to reading Wing of the Prayer, I didn't know the difference between in the high squadron, the low squadron, and the middle squadron. And so not only are you shooting at this guy traveling past you at 150 mile an hour, you're trying to do it and not shoot down, make contact with your fellow B-17s or,
And that had to, when you look at the box formations, and like you just said, you had high squadrons, you had low squadrons. I mean, it was all very, very choreographed and an immensely complex process into itself. It's something that doesn't get talked about, but I'm thinking, man, with all those tracers flying around from, every B-17 had, 13 50 caliber machine guns or 10?
2 waist gunners, a ball turret gunner, a tail gunner, a nose gunner, a top turret gunner, and then, as we learned from Mr. Harry H. Crosby, who said he didn't use his because it only had about a 10-degree worth of movement, the Navigator had his own.
Yeah, cheat gun.
Yeah. So that's a lot of firepower. But and on that same topic, and my cover's ripping off this book, which sucks. I'll have to get some tape. On A Wing and a Prayer and 12 O'Clock High, these are both great movies and books, content to read and watch to learn more about the fundamentals of flying in a bombing pattern. Because in both this book and that movie, they go through great detail to explain how important it is and why they fly in those formations. And the short answer is because of what we just said. The amount of guns per ship, when you're flying a tight formation, you basically have a bubble of lead. Once you get out of that formation, you still have your guns, but you no longer have the guy above you and the guy below you providing. And so they fly in those patterns and those 3 different levels to try to almost create a bubble of protection.
Exactly. Yeah, the defensive formation. It actually, of course, I'm only like 37 pages into Big Week by James Holland, but it's, at first they thought, well, okay, the B-17's got 10 or 13 50 caliber machine guns. It's bristling with armament. It should be able to, you get these things in a box formation, they should be able to defend themselves. Well, they quickly found out that they could defend themselves, but they were still going to suffer horrific casualties.
They're slow by comparison.
Right. So, you had to have the P-47s, the Spitfires, and the P-38s, and the P-51s escort them, which and they were constantly refining these tactics. And I'm not as solid on the facts of this as I want to be, because, like I said, I'm only 37 pages into Big Week, and that's the first Air Corps book I've read in quite a while, because I've mostly been focusing on Pacific stuff, and then, as you know, I read Company Commander that I finished up, and then another book before that on the 2nd Infantry Division. So this is the first Air Corps book I've done in a while, and it's just awesome to be back into that. But tactics were constantly being refined, and so when they began to get the range capacity, you know, they had P-47 to start putting drop tanks on them. You know, we all know the story of the world beater P-51 when they put the fuselage tank in it, and then also put drop tanks on that, and had the Packard Merlin in it, and just created this amazing, you know, war winner right there. But, you know, you had P-38s and you had Spitfires flying escort, and tactics were always being adjusted and refined. And I mean, so at first it was like, well, you know, the bomber pilots, as you can imagine, if I was a bomber pilot, I want to look out my cockpit window and see those Lightnings and Jugs and Mustangs like right off my wingtip or right up above me. But they realized that if they would release the fighters to go in ahead of the bomber stream to suppress enemy fighters, that was even more effective. It's just that the bomber guys didn't really like that.
Yeah, because you didn't want to feel like you're left out in the wind.
Exactly. You feel alone. I mean, and on that note, Don, imagine if you're, you know, if we're in a B-17 and we're crossing over the border, the German border, and you've got P-47s, which, I mean, next to the Corsair, the P-47 Thunderbolt's probably my favorite airplane of World War II. And that's saying something, because I like them all. I love them all. But next to the Corsair, that's probably my favorite. But imagine, you know, they were kind of short-legged. I mean, they just guzzled gas. They had that R2800 Pratt & Whitney engine that was, I think, 2,300 horsepower, turbo supercharged. They just drank a lot of fuel. And imagine both being a fighter pilot or a bomber pilot, and you're crossing over into Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And you look off to your left and your right, and you see those P-47s turning around to go back. Because they're ran, and they knew exactly where they had to turn around. These guys were smart, well-trained, the consummate professionals. They knew right where they had to turn around. And guess who else knew where they had to turn around? The 109 and the 190 pilots.
The pilots who, in radio terms, we would say back-timed. The base is here. They're going to fly to here, and they're going to have to fly out. So we're going to do the backwards math, and we'll just meet the bombers just about 2 miles after they had to turn it back and cut them off.
Imagine, and I've read memoirs of Thunderbolt pilots who said, you know, it just broke our hearts, but we didn't have a choice. You know, I mean, everybody knew that, okay, at this waypoint, we have to turn back, or we're not going to have enough fuel.
And let's be honest, it's 1941, 1942, 43, 44, 45. The weather predictions and the ability to measure wind gust isn't what it is, where today I can go on weatherbug.com and get a pretty damn accurate reading of what the wind is going to be all day. And so their mileage they can travel, though they had a pretty damn good dead reckoning, if you will, that wind changes, they get a heavier gust than they anticipated, their gas mileage gets cut down. So their turnaround time may get cut down by 5 minutes, which 5 minutes don't sound like a lot. But as you learn from watching 12 O'Clock High, when they had that bad 3-minute run, a lot of shit can happen in 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
That was another thing I was happy I read, The Wing and the Prayer. Here's a fun game. Go on Google. Oh, maybe I can change this a little bit. Okay, here's a fun game. Go on Google and type in World War II bomb group flare color codes. Nothing comes up. Reading Wing and a Prayer, I learned that when you have a wounded man on board, I never knew B-17s shot flares out of their roofs, and you shoot 2 red flares indicate you had wounded on board.
Yes.
And if I wouldn't have read that book, I wouldn't have understood that in the very beginning, opening scene of 12 O'Clock High, which I loved, by the way. Now, I have like 5 minutes left, so I haven't seen the very, very ending of it. But I love in the beginning when he sees the mug that you'd learn about in an antique store, and he rides to the airfield because he's there in 1947. Then all of a sudden it transitions back to 1942. You see a guy standing on a Jeep, and you see a 17 coming in, and of course it's in black and white, so you don't know the color, but I do because of the book. You see two flares coming out, and you see him shoot a confirmation flare. The next thing you know, an ambulance pulling up. So those must have been two red flares. But I know there was a yellow-green, which meant something, a red-green. And so there was actually different color codes of flares that they would shoot from these B-17s to indicate to those around them the status of their equipment without using radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was another cool thing I learned about both the movie and the book. Let me ask you this. It's a little confusing. So I'm reading this book, Winging a Prayer, and on page, there goes my cover. I'll definitely take it back on. On page 225, Harry's talking about how he got kind of, as his reputation and his rank grew, he got sent over to Oxford College to sit in on a brain trust because they were of allies. And one of the key things they were trying to figure out is, how do we make the English feel better about what we're doing to their young ladies? The big problem with the Allies was how much the air guys get paid, and the average base model flight crew got paid more daily than like the British generals did. They felt salty about that, and they also felt salty about the amount of young British women getting impregnated by our men. And so one of the things at this Oxford College brain trust was to try to figure out how to make it a little nicer and make people understand. But there's this paragraph in here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So he said, the purpose of this conference was not to come up with some kind of plans for solutions, but to encourage an increased understanding among ourselves. Because we're in key positions of our commands, it was hoped that we might eventually contribute to making improvements. Because I operated at a very low military level, I had no idea of the jockeying going on in the ETO among the brass. I did not know the rivalry between Montgomery and Eisenhower, and this next part's a little confusing to me because I'm trying to do some Googling. I did not know that until the United States Army Air Corps became the U.S. Air Force, it suffered in disputes with the Royal Air Force about daylight versus nighttime bombing, bomber escorts versus attack bombing, and so on. Now, the reason I say this confuses me is he's at Oxford in the middle of this war. I'm guessing by this point in time, it's 1943, 1944. And he's talking about it wasn't until the Army Air Corps became the U.S. Army Air Force that the British started letting them have say in things. But when I Google it, according to Google and all these websites, June 20th, 1941, it was the official birth of the United States Air Force. So how was the Army Air Corps having problems with getting a foot in the door or getting requests or listened to amongst these bombing raid plannings between nighttime and daytime in 1943 if they had already turned into the Air Force in 1941? Maybe the birth of the Air Force was in 41, but they hadn't converted. And you always hear the phrase Army Air Corps all throughout the World War II. So I don't know when the official transition took place.
I thought it was, I thought that came later than 41.
Well, I did some Googling too, and it said the first air run of the Army Air Force was on July 4th, 1944. I think 1942.
Yeah, I thought it was sometime in 44.
Let's see. The first bomb run of the U.S. Air Force. I don't know why it's not coming up because I just Googled this. But yeah.
Well, while you're trying to churn that up, so I think the question speaks. If I'm on your wavelength here, Don, the question speaks to. Are you saying why did the Air Corps or Air Force have trouble levying strategic say-so vis-a-vis the British?
Well, I just, that's all it said. I just read it verbatim out of there. I think I took my bookmark out.
Well, you had, so
it sounded to me like they almost treated the Army Air Corps as a redheaded stepchild because they weren't their own branch with their own officers. And what that paragraph I just read, it seems like the British didn't give them their just desserts or their just say so until they had a name change, is what he made it sound like, which is weird to me.
I would say this on that, and I'll feel better on that after I've read more of this book, because like I said, it's the first Air Corps book I've read in a while. But my own gut feeling is that it had less to do with that and more to do with the fact that, early on, the British were used to, it had been their fight for so long, and then we show up, and I think naturally, we're bringing more beans and bombs and bullets and gasoline than anything they're putting up. So naturally, our guys start to feel like, well, okay, we've got just as many of our people, with their head in the noose as your people. So, we need to start having a little more say-so in strategic decisions and planning. Certainly by the time you get to the Continental Invasion, by the late spring of 44 leading into obviously the culmination being June of 44 with D-Day, by then the British had to understand, okay, the Americans they're really writing a lot of the checks here. We have to kind of back off and let them have more strategic say-so than maybe we have been. Now in 43, that perhaps wasn't going on as much, because really, if you think about it, was it late 42, early 43 when we start, it was earlier in 42 when we start, think about it.
Here we go. Today in World War II, July 4th, 1942. Hold on, just saw it. Control F, air. Okay, the first official U.S. 8th Air Force Operation 6 U.S. crew joined the RAF crew flying, blah, blah, blah.
So July 42.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's when those are the first Americans to really take it to the enemy, right? And so it probably just, not out of hubris or any desire to not be a good ally, but it probably just was kind of a natural process that the British are a little bit reluctant to start handing the reins of power over. It just reached critical mass. It was always going to happen, just because, like I said, we're putting more material, we're writing the checks for this stuff. Not that the British weren't doing their part. I'm in no way implying otherwise,
they've been fighting since 1939. So
exactly.
They're the veterans, and here comes this new group of kids from the United States wanting to play, but it took you guys long enough to get here.
That's all part of the machinations, the internecine struggles of having an ally, and how do you work these things out? And they, and it was an alliance that worked beautifully. James Holland, who is British, a very good friend of mine, speaks about this a lot. And there is no greater admirer of the United States military effort in World War II and our equipment and what we did and how we aligned with them, in that united purpose of taking down Hitler. There's no greater admirer than him. And Al Murray too, who's his co-host on the We Have Ways podcast. But, I think as in the early days of it, the Americans probably felt like, look, our guys are up there in these B-17s. And you had, I think, Arthur Harris, Bomber Harris, they called him. I believe he was the head honcho on the British Bomber Command, and I may be wrong on that, but I believe Bomber Harris is what they called him. But it was Arthur Harris, I think was his name. And again, there were a lot of factors that went into this decision, but the Americans wanted to do precision daylight bombing. Oh, good to see you again.
Yeah, until I turn green, then I turn it off, because my fear is that Zoom will crash and then I'll lose your feed. So I'd rather not have a photo and have your audio than risk it crashing.
Sure.
I need to replace that machine.
So you've got this I was trying to develop a point there. And the video discussion got me distracted. So Bomber Harris, the Americans wanted to do precision daylight bombing, and Harris and the British wanted to do nighttime bombing.
Yeah, just hypothetically, it's safer. It's harder for the flak gun to hit you when they can't see you.
Exactly,
they can't lead you.
And I mean, they had already, kind of tasted the bitter end of the dirty end of the stick on this, experimenting with daylight bombing. But of course, they're using the Halifax and the backbone of their bomber force was, of course, the Avro Lancaster, which is just a beautiful airplane. But it was just a difference in philosophies. But it really, when it really got into a rhythm where we're sending B-17s and B-24s over in our bomber streams by day, and then the British are picking it up at night when our guys are coming home and getting out of their gear and eating supper and going to bed so they can get up and go do it all again the next day. And it just really became this relentless pounding of the Reich.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the other grievances on behalf of the British. They said in the conference he was talking about, Oxford College, that whenever they went on a bombing mission and their runways and their airports were socked in and they had to land at the American Air Forces, they were perturbed about the quality of food that the American pilots got compared to the gruel they were eating back at their own base. And I don't think guys get paid more than us. They're getting, not only they're getting our women, but they're getting better food too.
Well, overpaid, oversexed,
and over here. Yep.
That was the gripe, the one line gripe. But
another, back to 12 O'Clock High, and I'm sure obviously a lot of the source material came from the book, and the book from the pilot who served, and I'm sure this was probably one of the questions bantered about in sort of a passive aggressive term or a annoyed term was, oh, this mission's going to be maximum effort. Well, what the hell do you think we did yesterday? And so the throughput theme to 12 O'Clock High, the movie, I'm sure the book is, what is maximum effort?
Yeah.
And that question was raised at the beginning, implicated and throughout the middle, and then finally, yes, I know I haven't seen a movie until 2 hours ago, and I'm sure there's other people, but I'm going to give you a spoiler alert on a movie that's created in 1949. There's a point where one of the main people in this movie kind of suffers some PTSD, and this particular person, his whole thing was maximum effort. We got to see how much the men can give and how much they can take, and bravado, 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 don't be yellow. Kind of think of an Air Corps version of
Keith.
Think of an Air Corps version of Patton, and finally he experienced what maximum effort was to him, and his bravado left him cold on the runway. And I think that was a great way to they kind of said, well, I guess he had his maximum effort. And the irony that the person it happened to was kind of the one that, much like Patton, slapping people in hospitals, oh, I think there was a line, paint them and what's that yellow crap they put on you when you get like cuts?
Iodine?
Yeah, he's like, paint them in iodine and tell them they're good to fly. That was his whole slogan.
Mark them fit for duty.
Yeah, paint them in iodine and mark them fit. And I thought that was great. No. I'm looking at our YouTube live stream. I think it crashed too. Oh, there you're back. So yeah, I strongly recommend 12 O'Clock High. Here's a fun thing we do. Let's get on the old Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think Rotten Tomatoes gives the old 12 O'Clock High with Gregory Peck?
I would hope pretty good. Yeah, come on.
The overall critic score, 96%.
Oh, hell yeah. That's fantastic.
But it's only out of 25 reviews.
Uh-huh.
Now, I'm sure most of those reviews were from the 40s. I'm sure probably no one's really reviewed it in the recent years, because that's how Rotten Tomatoes works. They find every historical review ever given on a movie, and that goes into the count. But audience score out of 5,000 plus, 87%.
That's still pretty strong.
That's strong considering, as I said earlier, in modern day times where every single movie you go to the theater and see, there's action within 5 minutes and 38 seconds of the opening credits. The fact that this movie, you don't see any real action until like minute 142, that's saying a lot. And people definitely had a bigger, thicker, longer attention span.
Hey, that's a good point. Can I just real quick soundbite here, read a paragraph from Big Week?
Yep.
I just picked one out here, man. Let's just quick dive into this. Nonetheless, eventually they spotted the bombers below them. The 3 squadrons of the 354th Fighter Group had just begun deploying themselves when a voice crackled over the RT. My God, there are Germans coming up in droves beneath the bombers. That was precisely what had been hoped. Glancing down, Dick Turner saw both ME-110s and 109s climbing together like a swarm of insects, albeit still some 10,000 feet beneath the bombers. That was good because it meant the P-51s could dive down on them with a crucial advantage of height and speed. All that was missing was having the sun behind them. Go down and get the bastards, Turner heard in his headset. It sounded like Major Jim Howard, so Turner did as ordered and flipped over, pushed the stick forward, and dived. Down they hurtled, all 12 of Howard's 356 Fighter Squadron, each pilot lining up a target. Turner sped towards a gaggle of ME-110s, diving down with Frank O'Connor on his wing. As they neared the lumbering Zestura destroyers, split their flight in half, one element heading northeast and the other to the northwest. With O'Connor turning towards the latter group, Turner tore towards those moving northeast, latching onto one, pulling up underneath so that his 650 caliber machine guns were aiming at its underside. In a climbing attack at 8 o'clock, slightly to the port side of the twin-engine Messerschmitt, he opened fire and felt the Mustang judder with the recoil. Turner clearly saw sparks flare across the enemy aircraft as his bullet struck, then flames rapidly engulfed the Messerschmitt. Still climbing, Turner sped past at an angle, drawing up underneath a second Messerschmitt and seeing another row of strikes tear across the port wing all the way to the fuselage.
Definitely puts you in the cockpit reading that.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. And I jumped ahead to read that. I just wanted to dive in and give somebody like, here's a quick soundbite. Here's a little action, you know.
Absolutely. We usually do it at the top of the show, but we changed things up a little bit. We're going to do a quick mail call. Do you have that email in front of you?
Yes, I do. Let me.
And if we want to hear from everybody, so email us while Henry's getting us together. Email us at mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. I think this gentleman actually found the RSS stream for the podcast and actually used the email address we have listed for the Digital 410 Productions because it came through that email. That's how driven this guy was to track us down.
Cool.
So we want to hear from you, and we want to hear if you are an Army Air Corps expert. You can help us out with our question of when exactly did they transition from the title into Air Force and Air Corps, and provide us some of the information. And we also want to hear from everybody. We
love hearing your emails.
Let us know what you think about the. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is forward to Mr. Sledge from Eric Gall, Gohl. Eric, thank you for this. So this was sent Saturday, January 14th. 2023, 4:16 p.m. Subject to Mr. Sledge. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Eric Gall, and I would like to thank you and your family for continuing the legacy of your father. I'm a Marine Corps veteran myself, enlisting at 18 years old back in 2012 and calling it a day in 2017 as an 0311 rifleman with Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines. As I'm sure you are aware, it's the same company, battalion, and regiment as Robert Leckie prior to Bougainville and his trip to the brig, and same battalion regiment as Sid Phillips. It was an honor to serve in a historic unit with books written by former 2-1 World War II veterans to instill unit pride and belonging. I'm sharing with you this information as gratitude towards your family. Your father's story, Sid Phillips, Robert Leckie, John Basilone, R.V. Bergen, and every Marine's story from the Pacific Theater was the reason why I joined out of high school. I can't tell you the amount of times I've watched the Pacific prior to going to Parris Island. It was one of the main influential works that inspired me, as well as your father's memoir, With the Old Breed. Although World War II was well before my time, I feel a special connection to those men and have always found ways to meet and thank them. Last night at the firehouse, I'm a firefighter with the city of Charleston in South Carolina. I was cooking for the guys and listening to a podcast you did called the World War II Podcast with Angus Wallace. Don, it was actually exactly a year ago when I did that episode.
Nice.
So the World War II Podcast with Angus Wallace, which inspired me to track down a way to contact you. Since I only have basic LinkedIn and not premium, I found this to be the easiest way to send a message. To wrap this long-winded message up, thank you, sir. P.S. I've attached a few photos of my book collection that are directly about the Marine Corps during World War II, with some I've read many times over, as well as 2 framed art prints that my wife got me some years ago as a gift. Sincerely, Eric Gold. If I mispronounce your name, Eric, please forgive me. But we love to read. Thank you for that, Eric. That's a beautiful email. I'm glad. It's edifying to me. He's got a picture of his book collection, and there's With the Old Breed, along with some other great classics like Helmet for My Pillow, and You'll Be Sorry by Sid Phillips. And it means a lot to me when our listeners reach out to us like that. And, hell, man, just to know that we're touching somebody in a positive way, Don. I mean, I know it's edifying to you. It is to me. So yeah, thank you so much.
But what never occurred to me, we all know how Top Gun had such a impact on Navy recruitment when that came out. We've been doing this show for 5 years now, and you've been part of it, I think 3, maybe 3.5. I lost count.
No, just a little year and a half.
Really? Seems longer than that. In a good way.
Sure how do I take that?
In a good way. But what I'm getting to is it never occurred to me the recruitment tool that miniseries could have been or would have been. I guess because to me, by the time it came out, I personally was too old to enlist. It never occurred to me that up-and-comer high school kids would be watching that movie and that would be their Top Gun. It never occurred to me until he pointed that out. And even prior to that miniseries, it makes you wonder how many people enlisted because they read your dad's book, whether it was in 1985, 1992.
There have been quite a few. I mean, a lot of people have reached out to my family and said that. I will say this: if my father were still alive, he would be, just to use the term, gobsmacked. He would be gobsmacked by that, Don, because I mean, he looked at it like he wrote With the Old Breed as a cathartic experience, which I've talked about that many times. I don't want to just plow up ground I've plowed before, but for him, the notion that someone read his book and that made them want to go join the Marine Corps, I mean, he would be honored by that. I need to say that first and foremost. But I think he would think, man, after I described what I went through and
why would anybody want to go through that?
Exactly. So, and I say that with total respect to the people who did it. I'm honored by them doing that. It's just, I know my father would probably, he would be honored, but he would be surprised too. And same thing with the Pacific. I mean, they, as we've talked about also, I've been on many podcasts where we talk about the Pacific, and some of them with Eric or with Bruce McKenna. And, Band of Brothers had that more jingoistic, lighter-hearted feel to it. Mm-hmm. Pacific was a lot darker, exploring the themes of the individual cost of war and the emotional.
Yeah, no one ever saw a paratrooper running out of a cave with his pants down, being chased by a crowd while he's diarrheaing all over himself.
Yeah. Damn, Jay, it's not coming out your mouth; it's coming out your ass.
Leaving a trail.
Damn, Jay, you look like you in a sack race. My son loves that scene.
Let me ask you this, since we're on the topic again. I know people want to know. Last episode, your father sitting under that tree on your dad's property with his early John Lennon glasses on.
No, Eugene, you look like a gangster with those glasses on.
And he looks at your grandmother and says, I will never wear that uniform again. Did he ever wear that uniform again? No, he told that to Sid when he was at the ball.
No,
Did he ever wear the uniform?
Uncle Edward.
Did he ever wear the uniform again? That you know of?
Actually, I don't think he did. I've probably talked about this, Don. We had his dress blues in the downstairs closet when I was growing up, I used to always think it was so badass to pull those things out and look at them, and had his combat ribbon or his battle stars from Peleliu and Okinawa and his corporal stripes, and that was just now his dress blues are at Auburn now, and I hope to retrieve them either for my own self if I ever get a World War II room built, or to install them, enshrine them in the World War II Museum in New Orleans. But I don't, to stick to your question and not go down rabbit holes, I don't think he ever did wear the uniform again. But it was not, God knows he was proud of his Marine Corps service and fiercely passionate about the esprit de corps of the Marines, and so proud of having served with them. It was none of this was a self-recriminatory, kind of thing. And I think people who've read his book, I think people get that, but I think they understand that for what it was. But I don't think he did wear it again.
Good answer. I don't have the camera. I don't know why I keep showing I keep holding stuff up the camera. Even though I have not on. I sent you and Jeff a picture when I was reading The Longest Winter. They made reference to John S.D. Eisenhower's book, The Bitter Woods.
Bitter Woods.
And so that came in the mail.
Okay.
I haven't even checked the. Oh, that's kind of sad. I just opened up the cover and it says Merry Christmas, blank, and blank scribbled out with a black marker from blank. So this was a Christmas present to somebody at some point, and they scribbled out their name and who it's from. Maybe it's from an ex-girlfriend. Got to get this off the bookshelf.
Yeah.
First publishing 1970. This is 1969. So this is a 1970 publishing of it. Yeah, but apparently it used to be someone's Christmas present and they got rid of it. But that's what I will be reading. I'm currently reading, as we said before, Wing and a Prayer. But what are you reading, sir?
Well, I'm reading the James Holland Bigwig. I just finished Company Commander, by Charles B. McDonald, which we talked about last week. So I'm about 37 pages into James Holland's Big Week.
Perfect. I'm going to read one more story before we wrap it up. Before I read that story, though, I just want to say thank everybody for the continued support of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. We're definitely growing. We're getting more information, more people reaching out to us, and more follows on Instagram. Please head over to Instagram if you haven't done so already, or even Facebook, and look for the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. We launched our Instagram page kind of late. That was Jeff's idea. I just kind of did everything under my Instagram page. I had way too many social media pages to keep up with. I mean, for Pete's sake, I have 5 Facebook pages, and so I never really want to get on the Instagram hole, but we launched it, I don't know, a couple months back. We're getting ready to hit 500 followers, so please head over to Instagram and follow us. That's WTSP World War II, and you can contact us there. You can send us photos, and chances are we'll follow you back. But we want to thank everybody for your support, and please head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. You can find all of our information there. You can download shows there, see photos, emails from there, and there's a Patreon link. Click on it, sign up, subscribe. There's 3 different plans. The only one we care about is $1 a month. There's a $3 or $7.50, whatever. Sign up for $7.50. After 2 months, you'll get a free T-shirt. But $1 a month will go a long way to help support what we do here. Henry and I did upload a short edition, which, by the way, we got some feedback from. People love that. We're going to continue doing that. I think I'm going to start uploading little best of clips, stuff that you can't download off our page anymore because of storage space I've had to take down. So we'll use that as a repository to repost some stuff that give you a little extra thank you. Right now, if you remember, we're going to give you free stickers of the new logo. We actually started the sticker giveaway with the old logo, but we're taking a little longer because now I'm going to cut the new logos because we have the new logo. And but yeah, you can go a long way to help support the cause that way. And while you're on the page, head over to youtube.com. You can watch our live streams, or Henry plus my thumbnail and Henry's son in the background playing Call of Duty, it looks like. You can watch that every Monday on YouTube. But thank you guys so much. And here, I always find it interesting when there's modern day World War II stories. And this came out of the AP back on the 11th, entitled Polish Officials Say World War II Trove of Jewish Objects Are a Rare Find. Lodz, Poland, a discovery in central Poland of hundreds of objects that were most likely hidden by their Jewish owners during World War II provide a rare and precious find, officials say on Wednesday. Around 400 items, including silver-plated menorahs, Hanukkah's tableware and daily use items were uncovered in the city of Lodz late last month during a reservation of a house and yard. Those residents who buried these items did so most likely thinking that one day they would return home and they would retrieve them. Lodz Deputy Mayor Adam Poslik said, "Most likely these people lost their lives in the Holocaust. Such stories are truly rare and precious and are also a great lesson for us all. These items were packed in a wooden box and wrapped in newspaper." It'd be interesting to see the dates on those. Said the building inspector with the Warbud Construction Company, whose crews came across the stashed trove. Officials say the recovered objects will be transferred to the city's archaeology museum. Experts think the box was hidden early on in the war. The addresses where the objects were found at 23 Polonka Street were located just outside the perimeter of Litzen-Mathis Ghetto. The occupying Nazi Germany established this Jewish quarter in Lodz in February of 1940, and until August of 1944, it held about 200,000 Jews from across Europe. Most died there in the concentration camps. A municipal investment administration official said that the items and their history stir, quote, emotions and deep thought about the fact that we are not alone and that we leave something behind, end quote. So it's a cool story to see, and I posted it on our Facebook page. You can see the photo. A lot of candlesticks, like they said, menorah, a lot of silverware. And it's cool when this stuff happens because, one, it tells a story, but two, it's especially, we hear this all the time, Holocaust denier and this and that, and people saying certain things didn't happen. When people still digging up, this stuff, or in the case of in the Pacific, when construction crews come out and they uncover bodies, it's just a reminder that, hey, this history didn't happen all that long ago, and it's just a reminder that it truly did happen. This wasn't some figment of imagination, for all the people out there trying to say certain things didn't happen throughout history. Here's another reminder of 400 different pieces of silver hidden by some Jews running from the Nazis during 1940. And so if you guys want to see the photo and see the rest of that story, head over to WTSP on Facebook. I just posted that story. And I think it's going to wrap that up for this episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. I want to thank everybody for your continued support, as we said earlier. And that's going to wrap it up. And for myself, Jeff Copsetta, Mr. Henry Sledge, we will talk to everyone here again next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.